And we're back once again, and I'm going to be going over effects, effect racks, and your macros to do multiple things at once with one knob, and how to patch everything together. So what I'm going to do is load up a MIDI instrument, Silent 1, indeed. So yeah, I will turn off the arpeggiator. So we have a sound here. And what I want to do is I want to put that into a space, and the best way to do that is with reverb. Reverb is basically putting something into a space, and then having that sound bounce off walls. Right? And a delay is kind of, it's two things. It's basically every U2 song known to man, but also it takes a signal and then it repeats it. So I won't use ping pong because that's more stereo. This is also stereo, but it isn't ping pong. So what it does is they used to do this with tape. They'd have the record head and record something, and then there would be multiple heads after that, so you'd hear the sound and then it would repeat. So basically like that. So that's always fun. And what you can do afterwards is add a chorus. Chorus is basically doubling the sound, doubling it, and then changing the distance between the left and right, making it sound wider. And that's all well and good. Flanger and phaser, it's also doing that, but you have kind of a fundamental that pokes through, and you do it like so. And the more pulls, the more intense it is. Right, so we have that. So what I'll do is kind of draw in some MIDI. Just gonna draw something in. Why not? Okay. So what I want to do is I don't want to have all those effects going on at the same time. So what I'm going to do is create an effect rack. And this is a useful kind of thing to kind of tuck it away and only show what's important. So you select them all with Shift and clicking on them to highlight them so they're all blue. You right click and then you group. Right? And then you have this little thing here. So what you do is you have this little knobby thing. You got macro 1 through 8. So what I want to do is I want to link the wet dry of the delay and the reverb to one knob, and I do that by right clicking, and then there you have it. Right, you right click and then you map to macro 1. Right, and now what I can do is double click and forget about those, and then the chorus I'll put on 4. Right, so I will map the wet dry to 4, wet dry to wet dry. Right, that's a simple way of kind of doing that. And then you have you could do that. We'll take that away. I'll show you something else. You can have a simple delay and then another delay. Now this is kind of a fun trick. You group these right? But you set the delay time to just one section, one delay, right? You have that. You turn off sync so it's not synced, and then you can map the delay time. This is really fast, so right. So it's super fast delay. You can map that to 1, and then map the wet dry to the same one. Then map the wet dry of the other ping pong delay to macro 1. So you have all of these being moved, and it's kind of an interesting effect. Right, and then you can have that right afterwards, and then you can even we will collapse that. We'll group all these, right? So now we can get kind of confused here. Map these, all of these parameters to macro 1. So all of these parameters now, gets kind of confusing, are mapped to this one macro. So you get some weird stuff going on there. Generally, each effect, okay, there's how I look at it. That's audio effects, we're done. How I look at it is there are a few different types of effects. There's mixing effects, which are processing effects. So there's the EQ, compressor, chorus would be another one. Limiter would be another one. The glue, of course. Multiband dynamics. Reverb is a good one. Saturator also. And those would be the processing. These are what I use for processing, right? Saturator, also color, but the EQ for sculpting your sound, taking out the low end, enhancing the mid to high end, giving crispness. Saturator could be to make something poke through the mix a little bit more, and it could also be in the other group of plugins. The compressor, naturally adding adding dynamic control, making something punchier. Delving into a compressor is, takes years to figure out in relation to every single track you make and every single track in your track. Reverb, putting it in a mix, smearing it, kind of giving it a space, widening it, of course. Multiband dynamics, I don't use it that much, but I'm sure it applies. It compresses the low, mid, and high, and kind of smooths things out. There's better plugins that go about this, the Waves Q6, and even the Ozone Dynamics processor. It's all fun. Chorus, widening it, very nice. And the glue, kind of a retro modeled compressor, and the limiter, making sure nothing goes above a particular amount. And yeah, that would be the processing. Effects, no, we'll go. So there's processing, EQing, compression, making the sound poke through the mix. Here we have color. And color would be an amplifier, for example. The cabinet, yeah, sure. Compressor, I'm going to add that too. I'll explain why. Dynamic tube, soft saturation. EQ8 can also add color, indeed. Overdrive, yes, that adds color. Redux, it's a bit crushing effect. Saturation, and I guess final distortion. We'll add those in there. Just because they're there, you really shouldn't use them, but you should try to figure out what they do. So the amp, it's modeled from a guitar amplifier. It adds color. It adds, like, Jimi Hendrix style stuff. The cabinet, emulates the microphone to the speaker of the cabinet, and you can select your double stack or your huge bass or 4-stack. A compressor can also add color. If you crank the ratio up and you bring it down, it really kind of adds something neat to your sound. And if you want to hear that effect, listen to the Justice album, Cross. They use a lot of parallel compression, which is wet dry mixed. It's all good and fun. Dynamic tube. Think of this as the saturator, but it's more of a tube. It's complicated. It's kind of a bias. No, it's emulates those big vacuum tubes that are expensive and rare now, but not really rare. And it adds it's analog modeled. It's really underrated. I use it sometimes. Vinyl distortion, hiss and crack. Right, can add something fun. Saturator, you kind of go into these clipping modes, and you just crank the bass up and you get some nice stuff. EQ8, the EQ8, especially the previous ones, it adds some color, especially if you turn off oversampling. If oversampling is off, you can really crank a bit in here, and also you can add a bit of color by using mid-side mode. This is not for a lot of this isn't for beginners, but this is mid-side mode. This splits the center image and the side image, and you can enhance the side and middle frequencies independently. The Redux, it's a bit crusher. You can do the same thing, rendering your MP3s out at like 64 kilobytes a second. Does the same thing in Overdrive guitar amp. So we have processing, color, and effects. Effects would be, effects would be auto filter, auto pan, chorus. These aren't color. These are effects. Corpus would be an extreme effect. It changes the sound. Frequency shifter. Grain delay. Yeah, we'll leave that. Phaser, reverb. Both delays. I'll just put one in here. And vocoder. So basically, auto filter. It's a basically a one-pole EQ, but you can set an LFO to it so it opens and closes by itself. So it sounds like you're underwater. Drop it in and give it a try. Autopan, the same kind of LFO. Mexico left and right, wishy-washy, back and forth. And not really an effect without the amount. Chorus doubles it, doubles the sound. Simply put, vocoder takes the input signal of another one and then does something weird to it, and you turn into Daft Punk. Don't ask me how it works. Corpus, it does something weird. It's very unique. It can change a sound into like a tambourine. It's weird. The delay takes the sound and repeats it over a cycle that you set. So quarter bar, full bar, 16, wet dry, and then the feedback. Reverb puts it into a space. Reverb is, I use it a lot. It falls into all three categories. It's really nice. Phaser does some weird space stuff. Takes a signal and then separates the phase of the left and right, and stacks it up and does some weird frequency shifter. Kind of like it's obviously a ring mod too, but it's kind of another way of warping, and it's really interesting how it works. So yeah, without rambling, those are your effects, audio effects, and how you make a rack with a macro to do some really cool stuff, and do multiple things at once, which help make new sounds. And that's